time for earthly affairs. After all, he had already lost a loved one once, and only now had he found the opportunity to atone for his own weakness. The guy was the same person as everyone else, and the only thing left was to make every effort to defeat the damn monsters. And just like many years ago, now Michelle stood before him, to whom he told the story of his past. As soon as he sank to the bottom of the river, he saw the abode of the Celestials, and discovered a fragment of records on the comprehension of the abilities of chaos. Listening to this, the Sky Fox could not understand whether Henry was serious or wanted to fool Michelle once again. Now it all fits together, because the guy had also been in those ruins where Michelle had happened to be one terrible day. If so, she could have found more there than Henry, and the guy asked her what she had managed to see with her own eyes. The girl told how, while climbing the porch to the temple, she immediately felt a mysterious power enveloping this place. But as soon as she touched the door, the temple disappeared, and she realized that it was just an illusion. There was only emptiness around her, and the girl only had time to grab that useless relic at the entrance that Henry had spoken of. The girl believed that the monastery was built by a certain generation of emperors, and only people selected by chaos itself could enter it. As usual, the guy thought that he was chosen because he had always been a handsome guy, and the gods simply could not ignore him. But now was not the time for jokes, and Michelle reminded them that they both now knew the gist of the matter. Then Henry reminded that the cursed blood came to Richard from Edward, who had probably already linked his fate with the Dark Clan. Unexpectedly, without even listening to the end, Julia turned towards the exit, and had no intention of wasting any more time. After all, it will soon get dark, and the main members of the Dark Clan are still alive, which means they have a lot of work to do. Realizing that the young girl also wanted to participate in the fight, Henry realized that he would not allow this for anything in the world. He remembered how in her past life she had sacrificed herself for him, and now he wanted to repay her in kind. But she turned to him, and so much powerful energy condensed around her that anyone would have immediately lost the desire to joke with this girl. At that moment, Henry once again remembered that in a past life, Julia was the daughter of a warrior from whom he first learned magic. She sacrificed her life to protect Henry and was crushed by a giant monster that burned the city with hellfire. Therefore, she should not under any circumstances enter this fight a second time, and she should not even have the thought of it. But Julia didn't like to repeat requests twice, and this time the guy had to see her real face. If he had been underestimating her strength all this time, now was the time to change his mind and face the truth. The immortal spirit realized that the jokes were over, and Julia was ready to use destructive magic against those who were trying to stop her. Henry's entire body from head to toe was pierced by her lightning. Although everyone understood that the girl was not trying to kill him at all, this attack was a great proof that Julia's powers had become greater than in her past life, and it was unlikely that she would suffer the same fate now. With great difficulty, the guy managed to interrupt the flow of her energy, and at that moment the girl noticed traces of cursed blood on his hands. She couldn't believe her eyes and didn't understand why she saw these black marks on Henry's body. This only meant that the guy had an excellent technique for containing the side effect, and even Michelle couldn't show such talent. Realizing the futility of stealth, Henry stated that he had been training for a long time using chaos techniques to control the dark curse. If Julia insists, she can go to battle, but the monsters will be much stronger than any of her previous opponents. Michelle understood that the guy was telling the truth, and the power of mutants with the support of the Dark Clan would be truly destructive. It remained to be hoped that the ancient deities would help him defeat the monsters without serious losses among the civilian population. This time, the guy decided not to put off the main thing, and first of all began to increase the strength of his abilities. The Sky Fox was glad that the boy had finally mastered one of the techniques that she herself had used most often during her life. True, control over dark energy took a lot of strength, and no one knew what the guy had to go through every day during meditation. The demon's blood oozed out from everywhere, and every day the boy had to feel its disgusting taste. Every time he preferred to do it alone, and only today did the immortal spirit and the heavenly fox see how it happens. He asked them not to worry, because he had experienced something similar many times, and could survive as long as necessary. In fact, he had long been able to sense the presence of dark energy, and even noticed a similar aura in some of his friends, but he did not tell them. It was impossible to hide from Henry that a common man had entered into a relationship with a dark clan. Even if he only did the dirty work once, he had more control over the dark energy than he had many years ago in his first life. However, now it will definitely not be possible to hide from everyone the curse, which was visible not only from the marks, but also from the change in Henry's appearance. It was strange that he had hidden the truth from the immortal spirit who had been walking this path with him from the very beginning. If this continues, he will simply turn into a demon corpse, just like what happened to Richard recently. However, this was the only way to save Michelle, because absorbing the cursed blood was the only way to become stronger. This did not go unnoticed, and the guy had to experience the same wild feeling of turning into a monster that Richard had before the fight. When his fusion with the demonic entity reached its limit, Henry was forced to relive that terrible moment from the past. He was back on that ledge, with a monster that looked remarkably like him towering over him. The spear was still stuck in his back and out of his chest, and the monster continued to stand in place and not move. At that moment, an unknown entity approached him, and gently touching his face, told him not to worry and to continue living. Looking at him, the Earth's progenitor declared that he needed to accept the blood of a demon, because time was short and the Earth was threatened with disaster. It is hard to believe that Mother Earth herself persuaded him to drink the cursed blood, which means that in the past, he did not make this decision himself. These memories visited him again and again, and the boy realized that many years ago he absorbed the blood of a demon and died immediately after that. It was unlikely that she wanted him dead, but the upcoming duel promised to be brutal, and he would not be able to cope without the cursed blood. The catastrophe that Mother Earth spoke of eventually happened anyway, and Henry couldn't stop it no matter how hard he tried. Perhaps his rebirth was only needed to prevent this tragedy and change the course of history. But the most terrible thing was that there were two memories of a past life in the guy's head, as if two entities had been coexisting inside him all this time. Although, perhaps he forgot something important and managed to live not one, but two lives in a row. From the very beginning, the Sky Fox suspected that there was an unknown essence hidden inside the guy, and now her suspicions were confirmed. Henry couldn't believe that he was also among those who couldn't resist the dark energy and experience the same nightmare. To be consumed by dark energy meant losing freedom, and that was what Henry valued more than anything else in the world. Even the strength that the boy now possessed was of no use to him, since he was not even able to control it. His wristwatch informed him that his combat power points had reached their limit, and all indicators were above the permissible norm. Instead of rank 90, he rose by tens of steps and his combat power points reached almost the very limit. The demon's blood was a terrible weapon, but after absorbing it, the boy would never be able to become the same person again. However, with his current power, there was no doubt that he would give battle to the giant who, in his past life, dealt with the strongest magicians like bugs. It was no longer a problem for him to summon the dark force when needed, which meant that this was exactly what fate was leading him to. The immortal spirit noticed that Henry had almost suppressed the side effect of the blood, meaning his level of control was growing with each passing minute. I wonder if three forces could fit in one body, and if light and dark entities coexisted in Henry at the same time. The Sky Fox understood that Henry's guess was correct, because she herself was called the Queen of Demons in life, and both sides of the force were hidden within her. Only now did the immortal spirit and Henry understand where this girl got so much strength from, which she showed immediately after her appearance. Of course, it's good to have such abilities. But what if the cursed blood does not overcome the mana limit and exceeds the amount of human blood? In that case, Henry asked to kill him without talking or regretting, otherwise he would do the same to them. It was a little scary to hear such dark words, but both understood that the guy knew what he was talking about. After all, it is better to die than to turn into a senseless monster, destroying everything around and not realizing himself. However, is it worth taking this step for the sake of the Dark Clan, or can you choose another path? In his past life, Henry had already made this mistake and was afraid to take a serious step, which he ultimately regretted greatly. He didn't want to lose his loved ones a second time, and the girls who had given their lives in the past were now worthy of receiving the same from him in return. Walking to the window and opening the curtains, he suddenly realized that most people in this world are doing everything they can to simply survive. In his past life, he didn't have time to understand much, but now he clearly knew what he was ready to do to save this world. Only now could he admit that man could resist the superior race only if he took possession of its own power. At the same time, a gloomy atmosphere reigned in Agatha's house. Her mother was still seeing her daughter off on her final journey. Agatha lay in a coffin, and Sarah had not stopped crying since the day her daughter died a horrible death after the attack. Sarah was ready to do anything, if there was even one chance to bring her back to life, to resurrect her beloved daughter, who was the meaning of her life. And at that moment the girl's eyes suddenly opened, but instead of the usual look, a green, ominous light flashed in them. Then she suddenly jumped up, as if she had just laid down to rest, and the poor woman could not understand what was happening. Henry was already rushing towards her house at that moment, having sensed from afar the ominous aura emanating from that place. He knew very well what he would have to do when he saw the rebellious girl and hoped that her spirit could find peace in heaven. As he smoothly descended, he could already hear the loud screams of Sarah, who saw her daughter, who had died several days ago. Running out to meet him, the woman said that the coffin lid was open and the guy should look at it for himself. She also told him about the spells her daughter had cast, and Henry realized with horror that he was a little late. Right in front of him, he saw an ominous aura emanating from the body of the dead girl, which was painfully familiar to him. He suddenly realized that this was the work of the Heavenly Fox, who confirmed his guess with a smile. She had warned him that if he defeated Richard, a surprise would await him at the end, which he was now ready to present to him. Henry remembered using the 9 false moons when he first saw Agatha's bloody body and tried to resurrect her. Now the Sky Fox had only set them in motion, so it was easy for her to pull off this trick. However, Henry did not understand whether Agatha had become the same person or had also joined the ranks of the Walking Dead. The most interesting thing was that the Sky Fox noticed from the very beginning a striking resemblance between herself and this student. Especially at that moment when they stood opposite each other, they were so similar that they could be mistaken for sisters. It seemed that this guess occurred not only to her, but to everyone else, because it was difficult not to notice what was striking. Without hiding the truth, the Sky Fox said that she was sure that this girl was her reincarnation. Indeed, her appearance so closely resembled the facial features of the Heavenly Fox that no one had any doubts about the veracity of this version. Looking at the girl, both understood that she had guessed about Agatha's origins, but decided to tell the truth only at the last moment. Henry couldn't believe that the student who had recently been dying in his arms was able to come back to life and gain flesh with the help of the Sky Fox. If the heroic soul of the Sky Fox merges with Agatha's body, it will be able to use the 9 false moons and become almost invulnerable. If this illusion were to be dispelled, the girl would finally leave the world, so the Sky Fox never wanted to part with her again. The immortal spirit knew that soul transfer had been practiced for a long time, but it was a rare occurrence, and he didn't know if the Heavenly Fox would be able to do it. In essence, she was created by the Hall of Souls, and only with Henry's help was she able to be reborn into this world. It sounded convincing, but the guy thought her reincarnation was something else. As if someone from above was trying to materialize the heroes from the Hall of Souls into people. After all, as a result of the merger of Agatha and the Heavenly Fox, a new creature will be created, having both the characteristics of a human and the abilities of a god. The attachment to the Hall of Souls would still not go away even if he shared his life and cultivation with this girl, but the choice depended only on Henry himself, if, of course, he trusted Agatha when she was still alive. Suddenly the guy said that sometimes he doesn't trust himself, let alone another person for whom he will have to take responsibility. It sounded a little strange, and at first Sky Fox couldn't understand what Henry was hinting at. But suddenly the guy took this step and, using his magic, began the ritual, commanding the heroic spirit to act. It seemed that the guy was braver than the Sky Fox had imagined, and she looked at the young alchemist in surprise. But after the ritual, Henry declared that it was now her turn to act, although at first he said that he could not completely trust her. However, now everything had changed, and it was clear from his look that it was time to act and bring this adventurous idea to life. Immediately after this, the Sky Fox approached Agatha to perform the soul transfer ritual and bring what had been started to the end. And then, with the ability of the 9 false moons, she commanded the laws of nature to break their usual course and submit to another body. It was hard to imagine what both girls were feeling, but it was clear that this was one of the most powerful abilities now available thanks to Henry. A few seconds later, a green glow of soul transfer magic appeared, and the main event of the ritual was about to take place. Once in Agatha's body, the Sky Fox suddenly felt like she could breathe air like everyone else. And then, opening her eyes, she realized that she looked at the world differently and had completely lost the habit of human sensations. Although she remembered everything clearly, and there was not even a side effect of memory loss, which is possible after such rituals. Seeing this, Sarah could not hold back her tears, because she had already gotten used to the idea that she had lost her daughter forever. And then she hugged the new Agatha tightly, and she suddenly felt for this woman what a child usually feels for his parents. Even though she was a spirit floating in the air a second ago, looking at Sarah, she knew that she loved her just as much as Agatha did. And then, she rushed to Henry, realizing that he had become the main person in her life who had given her back the opportunity to live on Earth. This girl had completely forgotten her former image of a rebel, and now behaved like a sweet, innocent child. He thought Agatha was acting strange, but Sky Fox said that she simply had always truly loved Henry. Then the guy warned her that Sophia would hardly approve of long hugs and asked her to behave more restrained. Just in case, the guy warned that only they knew about the Sky Fox and asked not to tell anyone about it. But to his surprise, now the life force of the Heavenly Fox and the student was coming from one point in the Hall of Souls, which was only under Henry's control. After a short time, they came out into the courtyard of the house, rejoicing that the process of moving souls had ended so successfully. One could rejoice at Henry's wonderful ability, although the immortal spirit believed that the time for rejoicing had not yet come. If the Sky Fox had any thoughts of betraying his ward, she would have to deal with him personally. He was ready to kill her and would not even blink an eye. Quickly and without hesitation, he would make such a decision. In fact, the girl was indeed hiding something, but she did not expect such direct accusations against her. However, nothing could escape the gaze of the immortal spirit, and it seemed that she had forgotten what kind of deity she was dealing with. However, she had already proven her role in Henry's life, and intended to personally participate in repelling the invasion of monsters threatening the planet. At that moment, Henry thought about something, and the immortal spirit began to guess what thoughts were swarming in the student's head. Surely, if he had the opportunity to incarnate as a human, he would have done so, but he was less fortunate than the Heavenly Fox. At the same time, all the fighters from the clan that Edward had led for many years gathered at the base. Looking down on these fine warriors, Edward loudly declared that in their hands lay the last hope of humanity. He suggested that they cast aside their fear and give free rein to their abilities to prevent monsters from turning the world into ruins. However, if they start to act, there will be a noise and some bureau will take an interest in them and will start to persecute their families. Edward didn't care anymore, because this whole gang from the criminal bureau simply didn't understand what they were about to face. Now was not the time for questions, and it was worth simply joining Henry's team to defeat the mutants once and for all in alliance with him. Losing in this fight was forbidden, and now Edward valued the life of every fighter, bringing the victory of humanity closer. After this, everyone simultaneously knelt before the leader, showing their readiness to carry out the order and engage in battle with the monsters. Edward had changed a lot and was now grateful to his childhood friend for helping him make the right decision. Soon after her second birth, the Sky Fox and Agatha's body went to the mall, and the girl seemed to learn to walk again. She never ceased to be amazed that she managed to stay alive, although she already had one foot in the next world. All this time, the Heavenly Fox, getting used to the body, carefully watched her every movement in this world. Henry really did manage to change the lives of many, and Agatha, who got a second chance, was one of those lucky ones. They had worked so hard to get their new lives together that now they could just go shopping and have a good day. But instead of happy faces, an angry man appeared in front of them, demanding that they remove the car from the parking space. Another guy said that the old man did not dare argue with him, because he did not suspect who his father was. Realizing that she couldn't do without her help, Agatha prepared to activate magic that could easily solve such problems. The next second, the guy realized that his attitude towards the man had changed dramatically, and he had been wrong to be rude. Instead of continuing the argument, he extended his hand to the man, and shaking it, apologized for his behavior and words. This was one of the Sky Fox's favorite pastimes, and she was ready to watch for hours how people made peace. They still had a lot to go through today, and Agatha was ready to see this new world differently. As they passed by more shop windows, they noticed a man nearby who was looking for a long time at a couple passing by. But in response to the smile, the woman sternly demanded that he stop staring. Otherwise, her husband would quickly explain to him that he couldn't do that. After asking Agatha to exchange, the Sky Fox regained full control of her body, and Agatha's spirit became a hovering observer. Now Agatha's spirit could look down on the earth and understand that from here, the world felt different than in human flesh. She seemed to begin to see people's true thoughts behind their masks, easily recognizing the true intentions of those around her. It seems that behind the guy's apparent calm, there may be a person who is incapable of anything, who cannot even pass a level in a children's game. If before she trusted everything people said, now she clearly saw the true intentions that they were trying to hide. Agatha believed that seeing through people was the ability of the Sky Fox, but she assured that it was not magic, but simply life experience. When you raise your soul level to the limit, you become much more sensitive to the emotions and obsessions of others. There is little good in this, because most of the thoughts were terrible, and people struggle with their inner demons all day long. However, Agatha herself did not understand what her life was really like, and whether it was as wonderful as it seemed before. But the girl determines her own life, and it depends only on her what it will be like in the real world. Now, seeing through people, Agatha realized that the man standing with the young girl was secretly harassing her, and she was only enduring humiliation. But now she had control over the ability of the Sky Fox, and with one effort of will, Agatha commanded to activate this power. Immediately after this, the bone on the scoundrel's wrist broke in half, and the man received the punishment he deserved. He cried out loudly in pain, holding his broken arm and not understanding how this could have happened. And then Agatha wished that he would repent of his actions and confess the true intentions that he had been hiding. Under this hypnosis, the man turned to the girl and declared that he had behaved like a brute all his life and bitterly regretted it. Both girls were delighted with the scene, realizing that changing the world is much easier than is commonly believed. At some point, the Sky Fox in Agatha's body noticed an expensive boutique and decided to remember her past life. All this luxury before her eyes was once available. But after death, it lost its meaning for her. At that moment, Agatha realized that the Sky Fox had decided to buy herself something from the boutique, although each item cost a fortune. But the Sky Fox, paying no attention, flew into the store and loudly greeted the seller. In response, the woman smiled warmly, saying that the guest could choose any handbag she liked. The Sky Fox immediately took a liking to the handbag in the very center of the boutique, although there was no more expensive item in the entire store. At the last moment, Agatha tried to dissuade her because they didn't have money for this handbag, and without money, you can't buy anything in the world. Looking at the saleswoman, Agatha realized that she was hiding her intentions, considering her another rich girl whom she always despised. But instead of keeping silent, the Sky Fox directly asked the saleswoman why she didn't like her so much. Of course, she replied with a wide smile that this was not the case at all and that the girl had simply misunderstood her. But the Sky Fox didn't want to listen and demanded that she immediately ask for forgiveness, because now she was a customer of the store. Meanwhile, Henry was going up the escalator and telling the immortal spirit what he thought about Agatha's rebirth. But in the middle of the conversation, he suddenly noticed familiar female silhouettes nearby and realized that he couldn't leave these girls alone. It was unclear where the Sky Fox had learned to control people, but Henry had seen how well her magic worked. The salesmen gathered around her, each vying with each other to serve this girl, happy that she allowed them to do so. For some reason, she wanted to remember her past life, when everyone was currying favor with her, and artisans were delighting her with fashionable clothes. Suddenly, she noticed how one of the women accidentally fell over the railing of the second floor and flew down. Time slowed down for the Sky Fox, and she did not worry about the saleswoman whose life she intended to save. Using her tailwind ability, she sent a swarm of yellow flowers to where the saleswoman was supposed to fall in seconds. Indeed, instead of crashing onto the hard floor, the woman fell onto something soft, capable of supporting her obese body. Then, using the same ability, Sky Fox wanted to continue and do another little trick. Immediately after this, the woman was caught up in a new wave of energy, which carried her back to the second floor. In parting, the Sky Fox waved her hand, and flower petals fluttered in the wind all around her, surrounding her with a magical aura. In gratitude for the rescue, the woman fell to her knees, because the Sky Fox was the only one who prevented this death in time. It seemed that the Sky Fox had forgotten that she was in human form, and was raising suspicions by displaying magical abilities. But she didn't care about the attitude of those around her, and she was glad that she had seen a lot during the day. Seeing Henry in the distance, she waved happily at him, and was surprised to find that she saw his spiritual mentor. The Sky Fox's consciousness quietly warned her that she was showing too much affection for Henry, and needed to cool her ardor a little. Although there is nothing wrong with this, especially since Henry was not officially married to Sophia. So a little flirting will only add a little interest to life. Besides, she could help her new charge a little if she stayed at the mall and allowed herself one little joy. And then she saw 3 salespeople from expensive boutiques in front of her, and each presented her with a bill of no less than $1 million for the outfit. Suddenly, the Sky Fox asked Henry to pay for the purchases, and the boy did not understand why he should do this. But Henry was her master, and therefore it was his duty, which he could not go against. The saleswoman looked at the customer with a smile, hoping that these young people would not run away without paying for the clothes. However, Henry was not happy with this state of affairs, and would have preferred to be consulted before choosing things in boutiques. In the end, the guy refused and did not intend to return to this topic, hoping that they understood each other. But suddenly the guy changed his mind, and with a welcoming look, swiped his card across the terminal, paying for the girl's purchases. The next second, he caught himself thinking that this cunning girl had cast magic on him too, and he had acted like a puppet in her hands. Immediately after this, Henry received a notification from the bank, and a large sum was written off from his account for the girl's expensive things. She smiled sweetly in response, saying that it was just a prank and that she could be forgiven for being an ordinary person for a short time. But here the immortal spirit intervened, because the girl had behaved defiantly before, and now she had crossed the line. Realizing he had no choice, Henry activated the soul splitting, otherwise things would go too far. Immediately after this, Agatha felt that she had returned to her body, and the Sky Fox had once again become a disembodied spirit. Not understanding why Henry had interrupted the fusion, the Sky Fox attacked him with angry cries, but the boy considered it fair. However, she had been trapped in the Hall of Souls without a body for so many years that he could have been more lenient and allowed a little joy. But if this continued, Henry could break the contract, and then she would go to a place where there were definitely no boutiques. This news could horrify any girl, even one who had died many years ago and had become a floating entity in the air. At that moment, Agatha felt powerless and realized that if she didn't learn control, she would remain an empty shell. Suddenly, the Sky Fox got the crazy idea to get pleasure through violence, and Henry realized that he should have thought carefully before reviving her. According to legend, the Heavenly Fox suffered from a mental illness as a child, and the immortal spirit realized that it was time to bring her down to earth and teach her a lesson. And she continued to look into the alchemist's eyes with hope, hoping that he would return her to Agatha's body for a walk through the boutiques. Suddenly, the Sky Fox realized that control over Agatha's body had returned, and she could feel her hands again. In fact, she wanted to please the world with beauty, and enjoy the emotions of the people she was accustomed to in her past life. But she could easily use her abilities to take things from the boutique without paying for them. Although Henry was always against it and never used magic to deceive ordinary people in stores, that same evening, an event occurred for which Henry had been preparing every day since the beginning of his rebirth. A young girl was walking home from work when she realized that someone was watching her from a dark corner. She called her mother in horror and reported that she was being followed, and was worried about whether she would be able to get home safely. Before she could finish her sentence, she heard a noise behind her and turned sharply, looking into the corner of a dark alley. She realized that there was no one behind her, but it was hard to believe that she had misheard, and that the rustling was a hallucination. And the next second, a dark entity appeared behind her, grabbing her so quickly that the girl didn't even have time to scream. After a while, opening her eyes with difficulty, she saw a strange room where she found herself for the first time in her life. It turned out that the unfortunate woman was confused with Henry's friend, and only now it became clear that she was only slightly similar in appearance. But there was no turning back because she had already been infected with the monster's blood, and her body began to be covered with skin, like that of mutants. The girl felt with horror the approach of her death, and the most terrible thing was that she would have to die in the guise of a monster. And then all the mutant energy manifested itself in her body, and she easily broke the chains that held her on the couch. That same evening, Henry and the immortal spirit were walking through the very courtyard where the girl had recently been kidnapped. Suddenly, the guy remembered that he and Sophia had agreed to go to the evening market, but he was completely immersed in all these urgent matters because of the arrival of the mutants. Luckily, he had that very expensive bag from the boutique, and the immortal spirit advised him to give it to Sophia as an apology. It was a great idea, and Henry was once again convinced that the immortal spirit was an excellent advisor when it came to dealing with women. Agatha was also glad to meet the Sky Fox, who always knew an easy way to get her way with the help of men. She was pleased that the caring guy bought her so many fashionable things that would be enough for the whole year ahead. Suddenly, Agatha realized that the magic of soul transfer was working differently, and she was losing control of her body again. It is difficult to understand whether this is an illusion or reality, but Agatha seemed to begin to see objects in the universe that were previously hidden from view. Just recently, her cold body lay on the ground, but after the monster's attack, she felt her soul leaving it. The Sky Fox in her past life also felt something similar on the day of her fight with Ronald, seeing demons as soon as she started using magic. It seemed that the reincarnation effect worked unexpectedly, because both girls could not only feel, but also see the same thing. They were surprisingly similar, and if you forget about the fusion of spirit and body, you could think that they were twins. Falling to her knees, Agatha loudly asked the Sky Fox what was happening to her and why she was seeing hallucinations. She replied that these were illusions, and now Agatha had to learn not to succumb to them, no matter how real they seemed. If she believes in visions even for a moment,